I've probably seen some very highly classified information during the beginning of my career. So has Yulia. She also comes from a military family. Her parents are retired now. And getting to the point now, on October 31st of 2018, my wife and I were falsely arrested and falsely imprisoned by the Santa Barbara Police Department. They basically didn't do any investigation. That was clear. About halfway through, my wife decided that we better do something because our attorneys were not representing us. She turned her formidable investigation skills towards the Santa Barbara Police Department. And she found that they had concealed evidence, manufactured evidence, and destroyed evidence. Additionally, there happened to be a key recording of exculpatory evidence. This exculpatory evidence was a recording of Yulia by former Detective Heather Clark and Sergeant John Ingram. That evidence was not given to us, but when we did receive it, it was completely hacked over 250 times. My expertise at Submarine Base Bangor during the Cold War, I was extensively trained as an acoustics engineer for the U.S. Ohio class submarine. I analyzed that tape, and I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm a definitive expert. That's one of the classified capabilities that I have. And so that whole tape was extensively hacked, where my wife identified crimes that were being committed against my family. So probably it's kind of my general comment. But what I have here is a second complaint for you. I would like you to look at this and consider this very seriously. And in here it explains more issues about the concealed evidence, the destroyed evidence, and the manufactured evidence that's still going on to this day that involve 3 cases that I'm involved with. It's not the criminal case. It involves a divorce case that I'm still embroiled in. It also involves a conservatorship case of my mother, Dorothy Bogert Walther. Now, Dorothy Bogert is one of those members of the military family of my, let's see, there's 12 military, 12 families of my,
I'm sorry, you're out of time.
Okay, that's it? Okay, we don't hear any more, I guess. I'm going to hand this over so you make certain that you receive this. Thanks.
So this is a good opportunity. While we can't, commissioners, we can't respond to public comments, this is a good reminder to the public that there are several ways to file complaints of alleged misconduct against the Santa Barbara Police Department. One is online and in person at the department. Another is at the county clerk's office. And when those complaints are filed, the commission does not receive detailed information because of personnel laws and privacy. We will receive information through the quarterly reports that we're going to hear this afternoon. When a complaint is filed to the commission, that's when we receive that information as public information. So if a complaint was filed to us, we will know what the complaint was about and the details of that complaint. We are still prohibited as commissioners to intervene in that investigation. We can't persuade or attempt to persuade Santa Barbara Police Department to reach certain findings. So as commissioners, we simply receive the information and we submit it to Santa Barbara Police Department so that they can do their appropriate process for investigations.
And Chair Rodriguez, I just wanted to add, they can also file complaints through the City Administrator's Office, specifically with my role, again, Senior Assistant to the City Administrator and Staff Liaison to the Commission. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Chair Rodriguez, no.
Great. We will move on to item number 5, approval of the minutes from May 25th, 2023. And do we approve minutes of June if we didn't have a meeting? Yes, okay.
Yes, we do.
Do we have a motion to approve minutes for May 25?
I'll move.
Commissioner Herlinger moved
I'll second that.
and Commissioner Dozer second. Do we have a motion to approve June 22nd?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Dozer moved
I'll second it.
and Commissioner Hill second. Can we take a vote on both? Commissioner Hill? And don't forget to hit the lock. Oh. Okay, great. Wonderful. We will move on to item number 6, appeal of denial of taxi cab driver renewal application.
Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and summarize the staff report since it's a little lengthy. On May 25th, 2023, Bijan Yazdan Sepa submitted a taxi driver renewal application with a sealed drug test result. The drug test was dated March 20th, 2023, and tested positive for 3 substances. Due to the positive drug test results, the application was denied on June 8th, 2023, per Municipal Code 5.29185. The Santa Barbara Police Department recommends denying Bijan Yazdan Sepa's permit in compliance with Santa Barbara Municipal Code 5.29185, parenthetical H, due to the type of controlled substances detected and the inability to confirm what illegal drugs or medication affected the drug test results. I would like to add that Mr. Yazdan Sepas was able to submit to me a second drug test exam. He did test negative, but it was not included in the paperwork that you received since it was after the fact. Thank you.
So for process, we hear the report, and then we hear from anyone else in the public, and then we ask questions, or is that?
Chair Rodriguez, correct. You hear the report from staff, their presentation, and the reasons for the denial, and then you hear from the applicant, then the commission can ask questions. Each party after they're done. So you can ask the police department first after they're done with their presentation. Then after the appellant, after their presentation, you can ask them questions. Then you can open it up to public comment, and then you can deliberate and make a final decision.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Doimes, can you also clarify the time limitation for the appellant as they follow Ms. Martinez?
Sure. We've gone by what city council does and everything, so there's a total combination of 20 minutes, whether it's the appellant or representative, whoever he has with, combined is 20 minutes. Each party.
Mr. Yazdan Zapis, would you like to speak?
Good afternoon. My name is Bijan Yazdan Sepas. I've been a cab driver in Santa Barbara over 23 years. And usually I go get this thing done every year, and I did it you can see the paperwork that I did it on March 22nd, and I usually go to the Med Center, and I've been done it before, but I did this one at the place on Haley, and looked like they, afterward, when this happened, I went and looked at the Department of Transportation, and these places not even approved to get this result because they are dipping. They're not sending to the lab, and when they do dipping, it goes fall negative all the time. And they could, tell me that if I could request the lab, but they never give me a chance to do that. Which I went to Med Center again, and I got the result, and you guys have the result in your hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commission?
I have questions for first for the city representative. Am I correct that the application was otherwise in order but for the test results?
For which test results? The first one?
The first ones, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct that the test results that were submitted reflected that he passed the alcohol test and that he passed 8 separate panels of urinalysis?
For the first one, he did pass for at least 8 on the first panel.
Okay. And is there any policy or procedure of the city police department that requires a blood test?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Was there the determination that the municipal code section 5.29185 required a blood test?
Not that I am aware of, but I would have to verify with city attorney.
All right, thank you. That's the questions I have for you.
Any other questions?
I have questions also of the appellant.
Okay.
By the way, in the police department paperwork, they're asking for 5-panel drug test, and I have to paperwork it in there. Yeah, if you can look it up go to website, they have it. The application had the 5-panel.
Right, that's what's required by the California code.
Exactly.
So I have a question for you. Why did you have a blood test?
I didn't have a blood test. It was the urine. That's why it all, the urine. It's not a blood.
You only had a urine test.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any understanding of why the test results said that all of the 8-paneled urine tests were negative, and then there is a report which says that there's a series of positives?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. That's why I was shocked. And when after this stuff, I went because, I take some blood thinner and some other stuff and some medication for my health. And it's common to the dip that it come positive, but when you send it to the lab, they correct it and, but they never went to the lab, the first one.
Okay.
The second one has the one we went to the lab. And the first one, they never even asked me to. Usually when you do the drug test, they put the sample in a bottle and have you, sign it. I never done any of that in the first place.
And then you mentioned in your presentation that the entity that did the first test was not qualified? I didn't understand.
Yeah. And TCP, I have a license for the a limousine. They call it TCP license.
Yeah.
And if you go to the website, there is a places that you got to go sign up for the drug and alcohol program. And this place is not approved with them. The only places that they do send the blood, the urine, sorry, I keep saying blood, the urine to the lab, they're approved. This place doesn't do that, and they don't approve.
All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Dozer?
Am I allowed to ask what were you positive for?
It's on the report.
Yeah, I don't have the report. I didn't see that. Here we go, right here. Benzo, oxy, negative. Are you currently on methadone?
No. Yeah, that's the thing, one of the, I have a blood pressure and I take some medication and sometime, it comes, right. They said these are dip. They just look at the color, and they said this is, but it has to go to the lab to get the final result, to be, and these never went to the lab. They give me a result right away, they took the sample, and 5 minutes later, they have the result, which I was shocked, that's why, and I did it 2 months before, and if I had any chance, that I thought I'm positive, I wouldn't even go, because I had 2 more months. If you look at the date and the sample, it's on March 22nd, but my permit will be due on May 31st. I have more than 2 months to, there is no reason I go, I went early to get everything done. I had been doing this for 23 years. And this is the first time that happened to me. And as I said, these are the ones that are doing the dip. They don't send it to the lab. Is it just, lab? The second one, I went to the lab and I did and then I got the result and I sent it to the police department.
So both tests were urinalysis as opposed to blood?
No. They all urine.
Yes.
None of them
Yes.
is the blood. That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Do we have a motion? Oh, sorry, no public comments, thank you. One want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the permit be allowed on a series of bases. First, it seems as if the initial test has, at the minimum, inconsistencies in it, in that it specifies that there was 8 panels of negative testing of urinalysis, and then we have a series of test results which seemingly differ from that. It's also, I'd like to point out that it's my understanding, at least, that the CSAC program requires a urinalysis of 5 controlled substances, not 8. And the second test seems to be definitive in its identification of being negative on all 5 of those controlled substances, and is from a Medicenter, which is a well-recognized organization. So it seems to me that under the circumstances, plus the applicant's substantial history in the community of being clean and successful in his endeavors, that we should grant the permit.
So in summary, can we say that you move against the denial of the renewal application?
Yes.
Okay.
And to the extent that we need to have findings, I would suggest that the findings are that the initial denial was based upon a test which is either inconclusive or incomplete, and has been subsequently clarified by a test which does comply with the Municipal Code 5-29-185.
Attorney Doimus, do we need findings in this motion?
If you're going to approve the permit, then you do not, because that's the last level of appeal.
Okay.
I don't think the applicant would appeal getting his permit to city council, so you can leave it at that.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to vote against the denial of the renewal application. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, do we have a discussion? Okay, so we can vote on that. Super. Now we will move to item number 7, which I am looking forward to, the overview of the criminal justice system.
Hey, ready?
Would you mind?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. Professor David Saunders of Santa Barbara City College has joined us this afternoon to address another one of our required training topics per the ordinance that updated the duties and authorities of the Fire and Police Commission as it relates to oversight of law enforcement. Highly recommended from 2 of our commissioners. And in regards to really opening up the commission to various community perspectives, levels of experience in our community as it relates to the criminal justice system, as well as, I will say, just your reputation overall as a professor, academic, and colleague of one of our commissioners at City College, and really the impact that you've had on students in the community as well. So this is our first guest presentation and training as it relates to the Fire and Police Commission duties, and it was really a privilege to open up these conversations to various perspectives as it relates to community roles and responsibilities and oversight of law enforcement. So thank you for joining us today, Professor.
Thank you. It is really an honor to be here. I was telling the fire chief I brought with me this award that the Police and Fire Commission gave my grandfather back in 1972, 51 years ago, upon his retirement. And if you were to go to Santa Barbara PD, if they still have in their hallway the PD from 1919, there's a picture including my great-great-grandfather, who was a sergeant at the police department. I love Santa Barbara. The only thing I probably love more in terms of institutions is Santa Barbara City College. So let's get rolling. I'm going to try to keep this short and interesting. What my goal is if you were my neighbor or my friend or somebody like that, just give you sort of the basics of the overview of the criminal justice system with a real emphasis on some of the realities and challenges. So a little bit about me. I worked in criminal justice for 31 years before becoming a faculty member 6 years ago at City College. I've worked patrol, I've worked in the jail, I've been a detective, I've been a supervisor, I've been a manager, and I was on the executive team at the DA's office for my last 15 years. So with that, there was an intentional typo in this slide. I was going to correct it, and then I left it. I said, no, this is too good, I gotta leave it. When you get a criminal justice textbook, it's going to talk about the three components of the criminal justice system: law enforcement, courts, and corrections. Contemporary, progressive thinking includes another component, and that is victim services. It looks at what is the impact of criminal justice on victims, and how do we serve victims. And there's a whole group of professionals, victim advocates at nonprofits and at district attorneys' offices who help victims. The science and the data is really powerful when we talk about the impact of trauma on people, and that goes hand in hand with the criminal justice system. So I've left it sort of out because that is a reality. That is a reality. It's there, it's present, it's important, and it gets left out. I wanted to begin by talking about the role of discretion and how that relates to trust. If there's two themes or two concepts that when you're looking at the realities and challenges of criminal justice, what you want to hang on to are discretion and how that relates to trust. And at the end of the day, it's all about trust. It is the effectiveness of criminal justice, it's all about trust. So the reality is there is not enough resources to enforce, to prosecute every single law violation. If a patrol officer were to go out onto the streets and stop every single traffic violation, they'd never get to a call for service. There's just too much. So there's filtering and compromise, and everybody who has a part in the criminal justice system is afforded the ability to use discretion. There's pros and cons to it, right? It allows people to do what's right given the circumstance of a particular situation. It allows agencies, organizations, officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, probation officers, corrections to focus their energies where that's most important. But one of the big drawbacks is it allows our decisions to be influenced by bias, both explicit and implicit. And by now you've probably all studied implicit bias. If not, we should cover that. That's really, really important. But we all have them, some more than others. Race, ethnicity, class, gender, sexual orientation, and others. This is one of my favorite quotes that I use with my students a lot. This is Michael Braswell is a researcher well respected in the area of criminal justice ethics. And he says, having the authority to be coercive, right? That's, if you work in criminal justice, part of your job often is making people do things that they don't want to do. combined with the discretionary nature of the job and that authority, discretion, that creates the potential for corruption. That creates the potential for abuse. And so some of you might be like, well, let's get rid of discretion. No, we don't want to do that. That's when you get, and there's all kinds of case studies about the disparities between crack and powder cocaine and minimum mandatories and bad things that happen when you eliminate discretion. That's another big conversation, but beyond what we can talk about today. So let's look at what we refer to as the criminal justice funnel and how we go from, I don't think I have a pointer on here, but how we go from 1,000 serious crimes in America to 20 people who actually are incarcerated. The public uses discretion too, because only half of serious crimes are reported to the public. Only half. So if somebody is out there committing serious crime, one of the examples I used back in when I was working up in Santa Maria, it was tragic. The field workers, they would work hard, honest, hard work for weeks, right, until it was finally payday. Many of them didn't have their paperwork. Many of them didn't have money in a bank account, so they would take their check to a check cashing place where they would be charged like 5% or something exorbitant. And they would stuff the money in their pocket. Who knew that they had that money in their pocket? Local gang members. And so the armed robbery, taking their money from them, were they likely to report that to the police? No, they're afraid of immigration consequences. That gets back to trust too. So right off the bat, we see discretion and trust. Of those 500 crimes, 400 of them go unsolved. I hope that the future generation does better than my generation in solving crime. That's one of the things we're working for. So 100 people get arrested. Of those, the DA's office, and contrary to what you might think, there is some conflict between police and prosecutors. Of those, the DA's office says, no, you might think that the probable cause to arrest was enough. We can't prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. We're going to dismiss the case, set them free. So that's 65 adults. 35 of them are juveniles. Most of those get put on probation or the case gets dismissed. The 65 cases, 40 actually go to prosecution. Full 25% flee. They're bail. They are fugitives, right? 30 cases go to the next step where it's trial. Most of those plead guilty. And we'll talk about plea bargaining in a little bit. The three that actually go to trial of those, twice as often they're found guilty. When they're sentenced, many get put on probation, and 20 of them actually are incarcerated. So discretion happens along the entire pathway. The next reality I want you to know about, this is really, really important. Please hang on to this. So many people get their view of criminal justice and what they think criminal justice is from their social media feed, whatever's in the newspaper headlines, that sort of thing. That is not the reality. That's the layer one, the celebrated cases that we all want to hear about, the serial killers, I'm live streaming to the public, so I'm going to be careful how I say this. This is the case of the survivor or victim who the public can resonate with. This is not necessarily the victim who's poor and of color from a rough neighborhood, right? Those aren't the celebrated cases, but those are happening all the time. And then the lesser felonies, and 90% of cases are low-level misdemeanors. Another reality you need to be appreciative of is recidivism. People who unfortunately are caught in a cycle of committing crime over and over again. Nationwide, the rate is about 2/3. Almost 70% of people recidivate. So the real challenge, one of the real challenges in criminal justice is what are we going to do? How are we going to do things better, right? Because this is not bringing about the best that they have to offer society. This is not their best version of themselves. This is not safe for our community. We got to do better. And we'll get to corrections and that sort of thing in a little bit. Types of crimes, real quick. generally, I'm going to talk about crimes against persons, some of the most important ones, property crimes, and sort of organized crime, and that sort of thing. Crimes against persons are just what they sound like. They are harmful to the person's body. They actually, as much as people are the most concerned about this, they represent a small proportion. However, they're the most serious. So murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, robbery, child victim crimes. We are a violent society relative to the rest of the world, particularly Europe. These are murders per 100,000 inhabitants. Look at Canada has 2. We have 5. In most parts of Europe, it's 1 or 2. We are off the charts, a lot more violent than other countries. That's another reality. You cannot talk about crimes against persons without talking about sexual violence. The reality is victims, unlike what many people are afraid of, that anonymous predator that's going to attack them, most victims actually know their assailant. This statistic is one of the most discouraging to me. Only 25% of sexual assaults are reported to the police. When you look at the National Crime Victimization Study, where they don't take police-reported data, they take data that they do bona fide surveys of the public, 25%. There's very legitimate reasons why survivors do not want to enter the criminal justice system. It's understandable. But again, a reality is I hope that in the future, or the next generation moving forward, can get more people to report so that there's more accountability. Because what happens to the person that committed that crime and they're not held accountable? Crimes against children, these are heart-wrenching. I'm so grateful for the detectives that have it within them to work on these cases. They are emotionally very painful. They involve typically physical abuse, where the child, it's often by their parent or caregiver, physical harm. Sexual abuse, I had no idea until I became a patrol officer how prevalent this is in our community. I had no idea. If you were to look at the caseload of a detective at the sheriff's department, the police department, in major crimes or crimes against persons, large part of it is sex crimes against children. And then child neglect. You'll see this a lot with addicts, where they just are unable or unwilling to provide for the care of children's heart-wrenching. Now, the reality is people are a lot more likely to be a victim of property crimes. 75% of serious crime in America are property crimes. This is taking money and goods without force or fear. The biggest one, come on now. There we go. Biggest one, burglary. Residential burglaries, auto burglaries, they happen. They're probably happening right now. Right? It's the most common victimization in America. Basically, it involves somebody entering a house or a structure. It could be a lot of different definitions of that with the intent, yikes, to steal or to do harm. What did I do?
It's on ours.
Huh.
Yeah, you're just not getting on the main screen.
Is it Jen?
It'll advance ours.
I don't know. Should I? Oh, there we go. I'll see some.
Oh, now it's not anybody's.
Y'all can see it. Oh, but they're not going to be able to see. We got it.
In terms of the screen that's being posted?
While they're tinkering with that, I'm going to just keep moving here. One of the things about burglary, there we go. If you haven't had your home or car burglarized, or it's not just your laptop that's gone, or your money, or your car keys, or whatever. It's like, dude, somebody's been in my house. That's creepy, and it leaves an emotional impact on victims. Next slide, sorry for you all, but I can't leave types of crimes without talking about organized crime. And organized crime is not what you see on Netflix. The reality is It's not La Cosa Nostra or the Italian mob. They are here, but we know where they are and what's going on. Oh, you would need me to stand over here. Okay, there we go. Thank you. It is Mexican drug cartels, and it is prison gangs, especially MA, Mexican Mafia. And it is the relationship between Mexican Mafia and Sereno street gangs. That is legitimate, and that is something to be concerned. It's also becoming much more transnational, particularly with Mexican drug cartels. And again, that's a bigger subject than we can get into today, but I want you to be aware that this is real and it's important. Okay, so we talked about the different parts, the different components. Let's get into the law enforcement, policing, right? It's the most common when we think about criminal justice. It's the most common, or the one that comes to mind most often. But the reality is, when policing has very little to do with law enforcement. Less than a fifth of calls relate to actually enforcing crime, right? There's a lot more that goes on than enforcing crime. Recruitment is a big deal. For those of you who know me, you know that I am passionate about getting more women into policing, particularly Latinas. Thank goodness to Santa Barbara Police Department for helping me with our Latinas in Law Enforcement series. When you look at the data, the reality is women make up slightly more than half of the workforce. But it's like nationwide, like 12, 13% of police officers. So there's big pushes, 30 and 30 and 30, like 30% in 30 years. Santa Barbara Police Department does a great job of hiring, recruiting women. Several of my students, one of them's going to the academy in October, I think. So the data is clear. Women rely on lower levels of physical force. They're better than men at diffusing violent situations, better communication skills. They're not as familiar with the sort of boot camp approach to the academy, which can be very, very difficult and intimidating. So that's food for thought. And I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I was out for a run with my buddy the other day, and I ran across my daughter, who's a cop in town, and on patrol. I'm like, oh, we got to get a picture. She was handling a call, so yeah. All right, I want to touch now on 4. There's lots of different issues in policing, but 4, I think it's, when we're talking about realities and challenges, 4 that I think are particularly helpful for you to be mindful of. Gun violence, drug enforcement, gang enforcement, and homelessness. Each one of these we could talk a lot about, and I'm just going to touch on them. Look, America, I know I'm on public live stream, but I think we can all agree there's 2 things in America we love. Don't ask us to give them up because we'll fight you for it. One is guns, the other's drugs, right? We love our guns and we love our drugs. And so when you talk about policing in America, you cannot ignore the fact that there are more guns than there are people. And we are a violent country compared to other countries. Oftentimes people ask me, like, well, why don't we do it like they do in the UK? You know, the cops aren't armed. I'm like, dude, that's like comparing apples and elephants. They don't have people driving down the street with a loaded handgun under their car, under their seat. It's just totally different. So, yeah, we kill a lot of people with guns in America. And so policing, you got to be aware of that. There's a reason that cops are really careful. The other thing is drugs, drug enforcement. This is particularly with fentanyl. These are drug overdose deaths. The most I could get, the most recent was 2020. It hasn't gotten any better since then. Off the charts. And, you know, correlation is not causation, but as we decriminalize drugs in America, it is interesting that the drug overdose deaths are skyrocketing. And, you know, is it a policing issue? Somewhat. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But we have an appetite in America for drugs, an insatiable appetite, and that's part of policing. Gangs. Gangs are a big part of the criminal justice system. I want to touch on two things. One, I want to identify how cops call somebody a gang member. And then I also want to leave it on a more positive note and talk a little bit about Father G and Homeboy Industries. So how do cops classify somebody as a gang member? Well, oftentimes the person admits to it, right? Oftentimes the person is seen on a regular basis hanging out with gang members. Oftentimes they have tattoos indicating their gang membership. They will wear clothing. I've lost track now what it is. Oftentimes it's sports teams that have a letter that's associated with their gang. They're in photos with gang members, flashing hand signs. They keep rosters. They're on a roster. A reliable source has identified them as a member. They get arrested doing a gang crime in the presence of other gang memberships. They correspond. All the phone calls at the county jail are tape recorded or audio recorded. They correspond with them about gang stuff. So they have specialists at the department who keep track of all this over the years, and they can say, this is how we know this person is a gang member. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, you know, it's a choice. People choose to be gang members. I would suggest that if you hold that view, that you expand your thinking a little bit. Because as Father G, this is Father Greg Boyle. He runs Homeboy Industries down in Los Angeles. It's the most successful, most impressive gang intervention organization in America. And one of his comments, or one of his quotes is, not all choices are created equal. It's really easy to say, well, I wouldn't join a gang. That's because you're coming from suburbia, right? You're white, male, privileged, whatever. If you come from a tough neighborhood, and you're surrounded by gang members, family members who are gang members, it's like some people I know say, look, I didn't choose the gang chose me. So you got to be mindful about that in policing and criminal justice and the realities, again, of how that works. Homelessness, I am not the most educated person in the room on homelessness. I'm going to give you there's other people around, but I'm going to give you my Dave Saunders version of the 3 types in town and why it's not an easy answer. There are people who are down on their luck. They lost their job, they lost their house, and they're living out of their car. Do they need drug treatment? No. Do they need mental health treatment? No. Do they need aggressive enforcement? No. They need a home, and they need a job. That's one type. Then you have people who are drug addicted and usually, oftentimes, mental health. If you gave them a job, it wouldn't be effective. They need to be stabilized. They need drug treatment. They need mental health services, right? And then the last type are, and I don't mean to come across as harsh or anything, but they've intentionally chosen the homeless lifestyle. You could give them a house, they don't want it. You could give them a job, they don't want it. This is what they have chosen, and it works well for them. They don't need drug treatment. They don't need mental health services. They need to be held accountable. They need enforcement, right? So it's not an easy answer. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about before we move on, I think it's my last slide. Yeah. Okay, good. This is a controversial theory I hope that you're mindful of, and that is that with everything that's gone on in policing, and I'm not talking about the city of Santa Barbara. I think they do an excellent job, but you can't talk about policing without talking about other areas of the country. And in other areas of the country, there is an inference, there's actual evidence that cops are not very interested in doing proactive policing, car stops, probation searches, that in the poor neighborhoods that actually need the best quality policing, they're waiting for the call for service, like waiting for the 911 call, going in with heavy backup, tape record everything, do what they need to do, and get out. Right? They're not spending the time building trust, building those relationships. If you want great reading, read the book Ghettocide by Jill Leovy. It won a Pulitzer Prize. For anybody who doesn't understand the concept of Black Lives Matters, that's a powerful book. And it talks about the disparity and the differences in homicide investigations in Los Angeles and how LAPD handled them. Very, very powerful book. Dang it. Lost. I'm going to leave for just a second so I can look at my slide. Oh, it's what happened in Baltimore. There's some statistics. I'll pass on that. Those courts. We're going to talk about courts now. You need to know, I'm going to ask you to learn to know something and then kind of forget it. And don't take any offense, Linda, about the feds. But there's state courts, Santa Barbara Police Department, Santa Barbara Superior Court, Santa Barbara County Jail, state prison. That's a state system. And there's a federal system, FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, U.S. Courthouse, federal prisons. Santa Barbara is situated in the same jurisdiction as Los Angeles, crime capital of the history of the world. So what is a big deal in Santa Barbara that you think might go federally? That is nothing federally. The U.S. Attorney's Office is not interested. It's not, nothing's going to happen. Yes, Lizzie. Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. I get. I do this in my classroom too. I get all excited and I get. Ooh. Yes, sir.
Repeat that last statement you said about the feds and nothing happening.
Yeah. All right. So maybe nothing happening is an exaggeration.
What was that in reference to?
If you look at the number of prosecutions for crimes coming out of Santa Barbara County, 99% of them are state prosecutions, not federal prosecutions, right? So it's just, there's not a lot of action federally. Well, let's talk. The thing that's also that you need to know about state courts is they have specialty courts. So drug court, really focused where the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the judge, all have special knowledge about the needs of this defendant to overcome addiction. Same thing with mental health courts, homeless courts, and they're a powerful tool. And so you need to know that those exist. Federal courts, this is, again, if it's bank robbery, tax fraud, espionage, kidnapping, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Sometimes there's duplicate overlap. They'll take a case and some of it will go state and some of it will go federal. You need to know that if things don't go right or they don't go well for the defendant, they can appeal it. This is the Federal Court of Appeals down in Ventura. It's the state appellate court that's closest to us. It's different than the trial court when the case goes there. They don't retry the evidence. It's a panel of 3 justices that hear what's going on. Let's talk a little bit about the judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys. And again, most of you probably know this, so I'll move through this pretty quickly. But the prosecutor is the one who decides whether a case moves forward. It's not the police. Right? The police can arrest and arrest and arrest. It's not until the DA's office or the U.S. Attorney's Office files charges that that case moves forward. The defense attorney, their role is to protect the legal rights of the defendant. I didn't know for a long time. I thought, well, the defense attorney, their role is to find the truth and to to point the truth out to the judge and the jury and show that their client didn't do it. That's not right. That's not what they do. The defense attorney's role, it doesn't have anything to do with, I don't mean this disrespectfully, please defense attorneys, nobody get mad at me. It doesn't have anything to do with the truth. It has to do with testing the strength of the evidence, right? And so if they can make an honest, somebody who they know, a witness who is honest and testifying truthfully, if they can make it appear that they're not, that's their job, right? So very, very different role. And judges, they ensure the rules, evidence. They're like a referee in a ball game. Once the prosecutor starts a case, the victim can't stop a prosecutor. Well, in some cases they can. In most cases they can't. And you'll see this a lot in intimate partner violence where the person doesn't want someone prosecuted. The victim doesn't want the person prosecuted. The DA's office can still do it. And if they decline to prosecute the case, the victim doesn't really have much recourse other than suing them civilly. And we know civil attorneys cost a lot of money, like what, $400, $500, $600, $700 an hour. So that's not an option for a lot of people. Prosecutors also argue case at trial and the case at appeals. I think I talked about defense attorneys. Here's a reality. You know, my theme is realities and challenges. The reality of this relationship is that there is a shared understanding between the judge, prosecutor, and defense attorneys on how cases are to be processed, and for the most part, sort of a going rate, right? Agreed upon sentence based on the crime, the person's prior record. And the reality is, nationwide, 95% of cases are plea bargained. Locally, I'd say it's even higher than that, right? And so let's talk about plea bargaining. This is where it's usually the prosecutor decides, okay, we're going to maybe make a deal and offer the defendant something that's less, either drop some charges, drop the amount of time they're exposed to, that sort of thing. It often leaves victims feeling dissatisfied. It is a high-stakes gamble for the defendant, really, and it's often very heavily influenced by the defendant's lawyer, who might have motivations for things other than, you know, strictly have hardcore litigating the case. Sentencing. This is classic criminal justice 101. The goals of sentencing. When a judge decides what to do with a person after they're convicted, there's really 4 goals. 5 if we get really, the 5th one is restoration. Don't let me forget it. Retribution. You'll see this with really serious crimes with very vulnerable victims where the crime is so bad that the thought is, well, the defendant earned it. They have some retribution coming. The next goal is deterrence, both for the individual, like, yeah, we're going to do something to you to make sure you don't do it again, but then also for the people that might be thinking about doing that type of crime. Incapacitation or warehousing. You know, we saw that with 3 strikes where the thought is this person's so dangerous we got to take them off the streets. Careful with that because the reality is they're getting out and they can come out a lot tougher, meaner, more criminally sophisticated. And then the 4th one is rehabilitation. Like we want them to become a better version of themselves. We want them to learn some skills and be a better member of community when they get out. And then the 5th, which I should have put in there, I'm sorry, Lizzie, I didn't, is restoration, right? We want to try to repair the harm that's been done and get the victim's voice involved and get the defendant to understand the harm that they've caused. And you'll see that with restorative justice. The factors that a judge takes into consideration, the severity of the person's offense, how bad is what they did. Prior record, if it's their first offense, it's going to be treated differently than if it's a long criminal history. And then the judges are guided by certain statutes that give them an idea on where to sentence them. Pardon me, I'm going to step away for a moment.
Do you want this?
All right, we're moving on now to corrections. So we had law enforcement, we had courts. We're going to talk about corrections now. The term correction implies, oh, that's excellent, thank you. I got notes now. The term correction implies that we can fix things, we can correct the situation. That is not a universally held belief, right? And how you feel about that has a lot to do with how you feel about the criminal justice system. We talked about recidivism, the habitual relapse into criminal behavior. And we're a violent country and we lock up a lot of people. This is us compared to the rest of the world, our incarceration rate. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, far and away. One of the things I like my students to be aware of is what I call the pendulum, the criminal justice pendulum. It swings in American criminal justice history. It swings back and forth between tough on crime, lock them up, it's rehabilitation's not working, to let's try to rehabilitate, not lock as many people up. Back the last time, so it swung over in the 60s until a report came out called the Martinson Report that said, hey, rehabilitation, it's not working. And that's when it swung back to tough on crime, 3 strikes. Turns out that didn't work. So now we're in the midst of realignment and prison reform and a lot of criminal justice reform where we're swinging back to rehabilitation, and we'll see. We'll see how we do. Are we going to do better than we've done in the past? A lot of people think that we are, that we're better, we've evolved. Other people think, no, we're kind of doomed to just follow this pattern. I hope that's wrong. We'll see. When we talk about corrections, you need to know the difference between institutions and community corrections. Institutions are jails, prisons, juvenile hall. Community corrections, that is probation, parole, and this thing called post-release community supervision. Don't make me get into that right now because it's complicated, but it's like parole done by probation department, where the person is out of custody in the community, still under the supervision of the criminal justice system. The idea is we're going to have people who are on probation or parole rehabilitate, sort of reintegrate into society, get job training, do their mental health treatment, get some drug treatment, get a job, look for a job, go to school. And the idea is that they don't really need to be in custody and that we'll get a better result if they're not. If you're not aware of public safety realignment, you need to be. It's a big deal. That some people say it's the biggest criminal justice experiment in American history. What was done is a lot of people, among other things, were released from state prisons to county jails if it was what was referred to as a nonviolent, non-serious, non-sex offender, the non-non-nons. And then it also sentenced new nonviolent offenders to do their time in county jail instead of state prison. That's a problem. It's not as much a problem for us now because we have the North County Jail, but before we had the North County Jail, doing 3 years at 4436 Kyle, whew, that's a scary thought. There's no exercise yards, no big exercise yards, there's no rooms for meetings, no big rooms. So different counties have different jail facilities. How am I doing on time? I'm okay? Oh, good. Prisons, this is for more serious offenders. The closest federal prison is up in Lompoc, FCI, and then I guess they're closing CMC in San Luis, but that's the closest state prison, California Men's Colony. These are for people who have committed and been convicted of serious crimes and get lengthy sentences. Again, I touched on prison gangs a little bit, but the reality is the major component of prison life increases dramatically with prison overcrowding. If you were to ask the corrections professionals at county jail, they'll tell you that the sophistication of the population there is much more dangerous than it used to be. There's a lot more prison gang activity in county jail than there used to be. The reality is they are racially segregated, and they pretty much manage drug trafficking and the availability of goods. Jails are dangerous places. There's a reason that there's security is a huge, huge, huge issue. I just want to show you a couple of slides. I hope they're not too offensive, but you need to see them in order to understand the reality of the jails. Much contraband and weapons is in body cavities. This is an x-ray. It looks like a balloon of heroin. This is, well, I don't have a pointer. Oh, I do. If you look at this part right here, if you're a guard just looking at that tank right there, that's that piece, that's that piece. Oh, that's that piece with a smuggled cell phone in it. Yeah. Mail comes in. I remember when I worked at jail, they'd bring in this giant canvas sack of mail, and you have to sort through it. You have like 30 minutes to sort through it, and you're looking for stuff like heroin that's on the postcards. Lots of weapons, shanks. These are stabbing instruments, and you might think that there's no big deal, but like this, the inmates shave, that little razor, put in a bar of soap, can cut like that. And then these are the bigger, more serious weapons that you'll find in jail. You can make it out of a tray, a spear, rolled up newspapers, even a bar of soap and a towel, clubs. And then Pruno, there's alcohol. You can take the fruit or candy and ferment it. People make Pruno in jail. This is something that was found in an inmate, including ammo, cuff key, razor blades. You get the idea. Handcuff key made out of a toothbrush. Okay, I'm almost done. The last thing I want to leave you with is, at least in my view and some of my colleagues' view, what are the major challenges in criminal justice today? Mass violence, right? People, especially gun violence, mass murders in progress, people who have mental illness and access to guns, huge issue, huge issue. I was glad to see Santa Barbara PD SWAT over at City College the other day doing training exercises. That warmed my heart. The opioid epidemic, right? So is it a police issue? Well, you know, it's a disease. Certainly it's a disease. Addiction is a disease. And in that sense, it's not so much. But then when you have people who are profiting enormously off the misery of others, yeah, that is a police issue. That is a law enforcement criminal justice issue. Terrorism. I'm not the smartest person in the room on terrorism, Ms. Dozer is, but combating that, especially cyber terrorism, so much of our infrastructure is controlled through computers, and it's terrifying what could be done. DNA analysis, powerful tool, right? That's how we got our local serial killer, Golden State Killer. That's how many people are being exonerated who were wrongfully convicted. But if you were to go to the crime lab in Goleta and ask them, hey, yeah, how's it going? They are inundated. You'd think, right? A major crimes detective comes in, they just had a homicide. Yeah, I want these 30 pieces of evidence tested for DNA. Pick your top 3, right? Just the resources are not there. That is a reality. Cybersecurity technology, whether it's drones, facial recognition, encrypted phones, it's a huge issue. Law enforcement consistently is trying to catch up. And then policing civil unrest, both on the far left and the far right, right? We want people to be able to speak their mind. We want people to assemble peacefully. That's important, but policing that's a challenge. I have to say, I do use Santa Barbara Police Department's excellence in building relationships and how they do it here as an example. Like, I think it's very well done here. And then jail and prison overcrowding, right? It's not as much an issue at the state prisons as it used to be, but county jails in different counties, it certainly is. And like I mentioned, recidivism. Like, is realignment going to be effective? Are we going to be able to rehabilitate people and alternatives? And then finally, and certainly not the least important, the number of people with serious mental illness who are in prison, right? And there are reasons for that. If you're on one of my classes, I'd give you a scenario like, all right, you're the patrol officer. This crime just happened. Is it a mental health crisis or is it a criminal justice crisis? Is there any beds for them? What are you going to do? So that's a lot to digest. Hopefully it was interesting. And if you have any questions, I would love to hear them.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Commissioners, do you have questions or comments?
Excellent
Oh,
presentation.
thank you. Okay.
Oh, wait, there's more.
There's more.
I have just one question. I was really struck by the chart, which I guess is number 9, the 1,000 dropping
Yeah.
down through the.
Yeah.
the little page I've got, I can't read all the numbers.
Oh, no.
What's the source of that data?
I believe that it came out of one of my textbooks. So,
So you can cite yourself, that's fair.
yeah, so I'll grab that for you and send it to you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
I was just going to say thank you, Professor Saunders.
Oh, my pleasure. You're going to have to come back and guest lecture for me again.
Maybe if you'd
I-
accurately depict the federal system, that might be good.
Okay, sorry.
I do have a couple comments that I think may have been missed.
Okay.
I loved your presentation. I highly respect you, and this was a lot to put in a little bit of time, and I thought you did a wonderful job. Just looking at your data, your visuals were great. They were easy to take in, and I was struck by the high level of violence in our country compared to others, and additionally, the high level of incarceration in our country compared to others. And I can't help thinking that we must not be doing something right if we continue to have high-level violence and high-level incarceration. And then it also struck me that possibly what may have been missing is the prison industrial complex.
Yeah.
And how capitalism can reinforce keeping people in prison that may be better served elsewhere. I work once a week in Lompoc Prison, and I teach social emotional learning for inmates there. And I'm always shocked, but not shocked at the disparity between folks of color and white folks. So it just seems like our current criminal justice system is harder on folks of color and those who are economically not thriving.
There's a lot of data to support that.
Well, I hope you come back, because this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Chair Rodriguez, I just want to take a moment for if there's any public comment.
There's no public comment.
Were you a supervising attorney at the DA's office?
No, I was a cop. I was chief of investigation.
Nice to meet you, okay. At the DA's, just a cop?
Yeah.
Okay, well, good, thanks for
Just
your
a
service.
cop.
Just a cop, thanks for your service. My name's Doug Weinstein, I'm a 10-year resident of Santa Barbara. Love the city, it's a great city. Thank you for your presentation. It was wonderful, although you missed the whole half of the criminal justice system that needs to be reformed. And I'd like to talk about one of the slides, which was the one where you said the discretion with authority opens the door for corruption, and then the one with the courts. And so one of the things that you could spend another hour on is how the judges, the attorneys, you know, the culture of the court culture, how deals are already pretty much pre-done. Well, there's a lot more to it that needs to be investigated, and Linda, maybe you can get some help from the feds in this, and we've made plenty of complaints about it. How the courts, the attorneys, both defense and prosecution, Department of Child Support Services, Adult Protective Services, the police department, the DA's office, and the city attorney's office all work together to get the result that they want to as part of their court culture. There's lots, I've had personal experience of evidence being collected by police and not requested by the DA, which was exculpatory. I've got personal experience of evidence that was collected, remanded into custody, detained for up to 4 years, and then returned. But not only with that, what was originally collected, but what was collected from other cases. And so the discretion and the authority has led to very deep systemic corruption inside the Santa Barbara court system. The judges, the city attorney, the DA, the police, the sheriff. I've got personal experience. Why I asked you if you were the supervising attorney, I met a gentleman named Dave. We had a cup of coffee. He mentioned he was a supervising district attorney. I mentioned he probably knew me because of my case, and he looked at me and he apologized. He said, "You don't understand the pressure we're under to get rid of cases like yours." I'm happy to discuss the details with you. I think, Ms. Dozer, you've received some information from one of my friends and also someone who's had personal experience with the deep systemic corruption in the Santa Barbara court system. If you ask 10 people that have been in the family court system, adult protective services system, 8 of them will tell you that there's just something wrong with the way things went. So I appreciate you listening. I think the side of the criminal justice system that needs to be reviewed seriously is the relationship between the courts, the attorneys, the police, the city attorney, the district attorney, and all the departments that benefit from federal matching funds for the activities that they engage in. So the more cases there are, the more money the courts get. The more child support that gets collected, the more money they get.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of incentive
Your time.
to take money from the federal government unlawfully. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you. This is such a big topic that could be debated for days or decades. So I hope that this opens up conversations amongst the commission and within the public. So I thank you, Professor Saunders, for speaking today. Are there any other public comments in person or online?
There's no public comment online.
Thank you. We will now move to item number 8, quarterly report of complaints received by the Santa Barbara Police Department.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Rodriguez and the Commission. So I'm happy to report on the quarterly report, which is the number of complaints for April through June of 2023, as written by the approved ordinance in Chapter 2.09, or Section 2.09. So for that period, which is 91 days, we received 4 citizen complaints and 1 administrative complaint. Out of those 5 complaints that we received for that 3-month period, there are currently 2 pending complaints. One of them is Section 311.9.1, which is the domestic violence standards for arrest and site release. That's the policy section. And the other complaint that is pending is 321.3.2K of the Santa Barbara Police Department policy under standards of conduct for discourteous, disrespectful, and discriminatory treatment of any member of the public or member of the department. That is currently my brief report for you on our quarterly reports for second quarter.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Hill?
Yeah. So as I understand it, several of the complaints have been resolved one way or another.
Commissioner Hill, yes, out of the 5 complaints, 3 of them have been investigated and closed.
And since they are closed, are they now available for our review?
Commissioner Hill, Chair Rodriguez, Commissioner Hill, it depends. So for example, what you would have the ability to have access of what the public would in terms of the review. So if they aren't under the categories of our SB 1421 or Senate Bill 16, those categories which are usually the highest level of violations, no, but if, they would be available for review. But if they're more the minor ones that aren't under SB 1421 or under SB 16, discourteous treatment of the public, violation of an administrative policy, tardiness of being late, those types aren't available for the commission to review, because the way to review that is through the public hearing. So they would have to become public disclosable documents. So
Okay, I'm not sure that I understood what you just said. I apologize.
Sure.
So the the serious ones under the two code sections you cited are not available for public?
No, they are. That's the
They are
opposite.
available.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So.
And they would be reviewed how?
Well, they're just available for review. Doesn't mean automatically. There's no process that the commission automatically reviews these things, right? There's not set in the ordinance. It's not such a thing. So what happens is we have the internal system, which the department will conduct an IA. It'll be reviewed. It'll be conducted by the IA sergeant or lieutenant. It'll be reviewed by and that's it, whether they're closed or not. I know if there are sustained violations, depending on what the issues are, those could be reported to post. Those could be a discipline hearing, and those would go to the Civil Service Commission, a completely different branch. But if they're closed, there's closed. There's no mandatory process that these reports go to the Fire and Police Commission. And don't forget, the Fire and Police Commission also are looking at overall department issues. When you start looking at I want to see individual reports and all that, you start dealing with more in the purview of what's civil service and everything else in terms of versus, you're talking about individual employees and the protections that those employees and peace officers have under the penal code as well.
Well, there's a lot of information there. I'm not sure I did digest it all. My simple question is,
Sure.
if there is a closed investigation, which is not precluded by some statutory limitation from review, how do I review it?
If there is, there would have to be a request made by the commission. It would have to be set in the agenda, and there would have to be a basis to do so. So you don't have the authority as a commissioner, hey, give me reports of individual
Do I have that authority
employees.
as a citizen of the county?
You have that you do if they are disclosable under the Public Records Act.
Okay, so I
And
have
so
to
the
use
commission has the same power under what any member of the public would have to have access to those records if they're disclosable under the Public Records Act. And that's it, because if we don't follow that, then that's where we get in trouble.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Commissioner,
just-
sorry, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I know the quarterly reports are brief, but I would just ask that you be patient with us as we get to the annual report. What is required in our annual report is much more extensive than the quarterly reports, and it breaks down more of the policy sections, what the end result of all the investigations is. So I understand this is only our second quarterly report, and it's a brief amount of information, but I would ask that you, when you see the annual report, and see how much information overall, because part of the reason is because we have a small amount of complaints, which is why the ordinance is written the way it is that we are also protecting those that made the complaints and those that, on the department side, the personnel involved in the complaint process. So I would just encourage you, when you look at what is required for our annual reporting, which I think is slated for February, you will actually get a much more volume of information regarding all of the complaints, what the allegations were, what the end result of the investigations are. So I just kind of want to, for the purposes of the commission, for you to keep that in mind as we move forward with all of it. Because it is when you look at a quarterly report, that is a very short amount of time for us to get a complaint, investigate a complaint, get the complaint completed. So like I said, we have a goal of getting our complaints done with 120 days, but that's not always possible because there has a lot to do with not just on our end, but with on the complainant end, with them actually getting back to us and being available for interviews and the amount of interviews depending on how complex the investigation is. So, like I said, I would just ask a little bit of grace, so to speak, as we get to the annual and you see how much information is actually provided per the ordinance in the annual report. I think it'll become much more clear. And it will allow the commission to look and see what trends are, what concerns are, for the purposes of the public.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So, I may be wrong in this, but what I'm understanding is that the question is not so much about, the pending. The pending numbers are here. It's the completed ones that we're not getting information. We just have a number on, but we don't have the violation. And so the ordinance reads that the quarterly reports are supposed to show the the alleged violation for pending only. In the spirit of transparency and building community trust, I wonder if the department would be open to also adding the what is that called? The violation number of the cases that are not pending for that quarter.
I think it is something that can be a further discussion with the city administrator's office. I can tell you for the purposes of this report, I can actually, if it is okay with the city attorney's office and the city administrator's office, I can tell you what the three closed were. Like, we're trying to work within everything that we have. And like
Yeah.
I said, all of that actually, you will get a lot of information because each of the complaints, you will have that at the end of the year for all of the complaints. But for the three, unless there's an issue, City Attorney Doimus, I can actually give you what that is.
As far as the issue, as long as it doesn't provide any identifiable information of the employees, and that's fine. And, you know, and the one thing I just wanted to add before we do that too, what's also important too is there's a due process consideration as well. Even if an investigation is completed, doesn't mean the route of appeal has been done for that officer, whether they choose to have what's called a Skelly hearing, and then after that a civil service, or what may be after that. So part of that is allowing that due process, because any determination can be overturned too. So while it may be considered final from the police department, it's not ultimately considered administratively final until it's exhausted at its highest level of appeal within the city, and that would be the Civil Service Commission. But yeah, the purpose on that of making sure when we presented this and how we crafted the ordinance was to make sure we didn't infringe on the officers' rights under POBAR and under the penal code by disclosing that. So you're free to disclose at least what the topics are.
The
because
policy
they don't.
section related to the closing.
Correct.
And I can give you the policy section, and I can assure the city attorney in these particularly three cases, there's no violation or potential violation of due process. So one was 321.3.5C, which is unsatisfactory work performance, 325.21, required reporting, and 321.35, failure to take reasonable action. So those are the three sections of the closed investigations.
Thank you. And I hope that the department and the administrator's office would be open to having that be a normal part of the quarterly reports, because not that, I'm not implying that the commission thinks that the department is hiding anything, but when information is omitted, it leads the public to think that there is a reason why it isn't being presented. And it would, I think, just help with building community trust.
And we hear your concerns. You know, this is a new process for all of us, and I think as we work through it, and like I said, I think once we get to the annual, but to City Attorney Doimus's point, you know, I do want to be very cognizant of the fact that a lot of times there's still due process left with a lot of these. So we never want to interfere with that due process piece of it. So often when there is further due process, these cases take quite some time. So I think you'll see once we get to the annual report and the amount of information that is provided, hopefully we can have a better discussion about what it needs to look like in the future and have those discussions. But like I said, I would like to get to the annual report in a few months, and then we can have I think, more meaningful dialogue between all parties, so.
And Chair Rodriguez, I'd just like to clarify that nothing has been omitted. The department and the city administrator's office are working very closely together to meet the requirements as approved by and adopted by mayor and council for the new duties and authorities of the department. So I think, as Chief Gordon mentioned, we are still working through a very new process. And if the request of additional information, we're happy to accommodate that. And I appreciate the chief having that information available today, and as well as moving forward. And so I think, too, that annual reporting will allow for more robust discussion and discourse on if we're seeing any trends, any resulting, I would say, disciplinary action associated with investigations. All of that information will be available to the commission at that time.
With all that said, 12 complaints in 6 months is something to be proud of in a police department, so I commend you for that.
Thank you very much, Chair Rodriguez.
All righty, any comments from the public in person or online?
We do not have public comment.
Okey doke. So moving on to commission and staff communication. Would commissioners like to add anything or discuss anything or bring something up that's not on the agenda? Okey doke. I attended the Coffee with a Cop earlier this week with Commissioner Hillinger, and that was nice. It was on the west side, which was a new location. And I encourage the public to attend those events as well and have some great conversations with our local police department. I also wanted to make note that a public comment was received from CLUE, Santa Barbara, and League of Women Voters, Joint Criminal Justice Work Group, inquiring about how the opioid crisis settlement funds will be utilized and a request to provide input when that decision-making process begins. A report on that will be presented by SBPD at a future date. And also today, SB Pals hosted a lovely event for a young person, 14 years old, in our community who was diagnosed with bone cancer. So Santa Barbara Police Department, Santa Barbara City Fire Department, CHP, the detectives, folks, and community members came together for this young man and did a parade. They decorated vehicles and motorcycles and all wore yellow, which I'm doing today. And I just thought it was a beautiful display of camaraderie, and not just camaraderie among folks who wear uniform, but also camaraderie within our community. And that was such a perfect display of police and community coming together for one of our most vulnerable members. So thank you, SB PAL, for doing that.
Chair Rodriguez, I just wanted to let the public know that we have initiated the special recruitment to fill the vacancy on the Fire and Police Commission. Mayor and Council initiated that last Tuesday. The deadline to submit applications is Thursday, August 17th by 5 p.m. We will be pushing the word out and really trying to attract passionate and committed individuals to join you on the dais here, and really, again, be able to continue the historic work of the commission moving forward. So that posting is available on the city's job posting website, and the application is accessible through that portal as well.
Great. Encourage anyone who's interested to contact Barbara Anderson to talk about the details, or reach out to one of our commissioners. If there's no objections, we can close the meeting of the Fire and Police Commission at 5:30 p.m. Thank you.
No modifications to the agenda tonight.
Okay. Well, then we have opportunity for public comment, both in person and online. So if there's anyone, I guess we start with in person.
Chair Malavas, we have no public comment slips at this time.
In person or online?
No.
Okay. Okay, so then I guess we can go straight into the announcements. So Ms. Grant, I'll pass it to you.
One announcement that you may have read is that the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, along with Caltrans, just recently awarded $132 million for a portion of the 101 freeway project. So it's the 101 HOV and widening project. So this particular section is a part in the county, and then a small section is in the city of Santa Barbara. It does not fund the entire freeway. There's still a small segment in the city that involves small but large, the Cabrillo interchange. That still needs to be funded, and SBCAG and Caltrans team are actively trying to seek funding for that final phase. But you may have read about it in the papers or seen it on the news of that recent announcement. And that is all for announcements. Okay.
Excellent, thank you. So I guess we can dive straight into tonight's staff report.
Yes, let's do it.
All right.
So tonight, this is going, just to preface, it's a longer presentation than our normal presentations that we have before this committee. So bear with me. It's about 45 minutes approximately. So I will be taking questions at the end, just so I can get through the majority of the content. Very excited, though, to talk about State Street for the transportation history and then future considerations. Why future considerations? Because we're in the State Street master planning effort,